Hi, this is Gabrielle Entile with Drug Topics. Today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Ann Justo, infectious disease clinical pharmacist and associate professor at the University of South Carolina College of Pharmacy. In our last interview, Dr. Justo highlighted some of the preliminary results supporting Remdesivir as a potential treatment for COVID-19. Since then, Gilead has announced their latest phase 3 simple trial results. Dr. Justo joins again to provide expertise on this data. Before we get started, here's the latest news from drugtopics.com. States are slowly easing their barriers to pharmacist-provided testing for COVID-19. In early April, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services authorized licensed pharmacists to order and use COVID-19 tests approved by the FDA. By mid-May, about two-thirds of states had adjusted their regulations for pharmacist-provided testing, but only a handful of pharmacies managed to successfully implement this testing. A recent NCPA poll found that the majority of their members are willing to test for COVID-19, but according to Hannah Fish, NCPA's Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives, getting there is a step-by-step process and you need to work out the logistics. Tom Kraus, Vice President of Government Relations for the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, pointed to existing statutes that impede access to pharmacies as providers. You can read more about pharmacy-provided testing and other COVID-19 news at drugtopics.com. Now here's my interview with infectious disease clinical pharmacist Ann Justo. Hey, Dr. Justo, thank you so much for joining me again today to give us an update on the Remdesivir trials.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
So last time you discussed some of the more preliminary data surrounding Remdesivir as a potential COVID-19 treatment. Can you give us a little review on that data that you told us before we get into the updated trial results?
Absolutely. I believe at the last time that we spoke, we had preliminary findings in primarily press release form that announced the Act 1 trial results. That's a study that's sponsored by the NIH. And then we also had preliminary positive results from the Gilead phase 3 simple trial, which was based on severe patients. Since we last spoke, both of those trials have been published in full. And so we've had a chance to read them in detail and analyze all the different enrollment, what patients were in the trial, different subgroup analyses, and so on. So we have a lot more information now than we did a few weeks ago.
Can you give us a little update on the Gilead severe trial?
Absolutely. So the Gilead simple trial that looked at severe patients with COVID-19, so these are adult hospitalized patients that had oxygen saturations less than or equal to 94%, or were requiring oxygen supplementation of some form. So that's the definition of severe COVID-19 as they described it in the trial. And so what they did was they actually looked at patients that were randomized to receive Remdesivir either 5 days versus 10 days in that severe trial. So there was important to note there was no placebo-controlled arm for that particular study. And the main question that Gilead was trying to answer in designing this trial was figuring out if 5 days of therapy was just as good as 10 days. And that's really important because if 5 days is comparable to 10, that could extend the limited resource of Remdesivir supply that we currently have available. And so what the study currently found was that for their primary endpoint of clinical improvement of points or more on an ordinal scale that they developed for the trial, at day 14, that they had similar outcomes in the 5 days versus 10 days in terms of odds of reaching that clinical improvement threshold for their patients, which was very positive findings and encouraging for a lot of us who are trying to make the limited supply of Remdesivir stretch to as many patients as possible.
You mentioned that last time, so with these updated trial results, what do you see in the upcoming weeks related to Remdesivir supplies being allocated to hospitals?
I think there was a lot of details. The first thing that we noted when the full trial results were published that we didn't have the last time that you and I spoke was that we noticed the randomization wasn't fully balanced between the two treatment arms. And so randomization is intending to balance the 5-day arm versus the 10-day arm on all the different baseline characteristics and other potential confounders, both measured and unmeasured, that might impact the chances of clinical outcomes for these patients. And what we found, which we didn't know before, was that the 10-day group again, this is a study of nearly 400 patients. The 10-day group was more severely ill at baseline, and that's based on the score that they received on that ordinal scale when they were enrolled in the trial. And that's very important because while the study investigators did try to adjust for this baseline difference, it's not 100% clear if they were effective in doing so. And so we think that the 5 days is just as good as the 10 days. And I think we can glean that information from the trial, but we also have to take into account that we're not entirely sure what happened with the patients in the 10-day group because they started in a clinically more worse position. In addition, if we're looking at the study results, when we look at the details, about 86% of patients in the 5-day remdesivir arm completed the full 5 days of remdesivir. Whereas at the point of analysis, only 44% of the patients in the 10-day group completed the full 10 days of remdesivir that was intended. Now that sounds like a big difference, which it is, and the main drivers are understandable when you look at the way the trial was designed. So again, these investigators are pressed to get these analyses out as quickly as they can because everyone is wondering the results of the trial. But what that results in is that the 10-day arm, a lot of the patients at that point had either been discharged from the hospital or had died. So for whatever reason, they didn't complete a full 10 days of remdesivir therapy. Some patients may have received 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 days. In addition, there's another important piece of information that we found. We found that they did an analysis where they looked at, okay, where were folks at the point of day 5 of remdesivir therapy? And then if you look at the day group versus the 10-day group, you would notice that the 10-day group, if you at day 5 were on invasive mechanical ventilation. Okay, so let me take a step back. For the patients that were enrolled in this trial, mechanical ventilation at baseline was an exclusion. However, if they started off not on mechanical ventilation, but met the definition of severe, and then progressed to mechanical ventilation by day 5 of remdesivir therapy, they were allowed to stay in the trial. So if we look at that interesting, small, but severely ill subgroup of patients, what we found is that patients on 5 days of remdesivir, about 40% of those patients that were on mechanical ventilation at day 5 ended up dying versus 17% of the patients in the 10-day group ended up dying. So 40% death versus 17% death. Those numbers are small and it's just a numerical difference. However, that's enough information for a lot of clinicians at this point in time to suggest for patients that are mechanically ventilated on remdesivir, they probably need to have consideration for extension of from 5 days to 10 days of therapy. So that's an important thing that we learned from the fully published trial results in the severe trial. So again, just to summarize, patients that are mechanically ventilated with severe COVID-19, 10 days may be better for them than 5 days. And so that's a lot of where that information came out in the FDA emergency use authorization that had that recommendation for 10 days duration of therapy, specifically for patients on mechanical ventilation or ECMO.
And do you believe that they're going to continue to pursue, since this was a small population, are they going to continue to study this population, or is it enough to make decisions on therapies based on those results?
It's very difficult to say. If you look at the main drivers of clinical outcomes across all the studies that we have to date, so I'm talking about the ACT-1 trial from the NIH and the Gilead severe trial, and now we have a new press release from Gilead that talked about preliminary results from the simple moderate trial, which is patients that have oxygen saturations of above 94% on room air. So if you're looking at all this data, in summary, what it's suggesting is that remdesivir does the best for patients that are early in their hospital admission and not yet to the point where they're requiring life support care in the form of mechanical ventilation or other things like that. So taking that into account, I'm still interested in seeing further information about whether or not Remdesivir will provide any help for patients with mechanical ventilation and ECMO. As I suggested, there's some limitations to how we designed the study. We also have only just been looking at Remdesivir in monotherapy form right now. A lot of clinicians are very interested in seeing if Remdesivir could help even more severely ill patients, like mechanically ventilated folks, if it's used in combination with other agents such as convalescent plasma or immunotherapies such as tocilizumab or sarilumab, all agents that are currently being considered as experimental agents in actual bedside situations.
Well, Dr. Justo, thank you so much for joining me again and your continued work as well.
It was my pleasure.